The magazine, no, I get a few magazines here at the house, but the New Yorker is by far my favorite, and it's just one of those magazines that I don't even really care about the subject matter sometimes. It's just so well written and researched and edited that it's just a joy to read. And it's easy to read. I mean, as an editor, my number one role, and any of the contributors who have written for me over the years know this, clarity above all else. If you lose your reader on the second sentence and they take that off ramp and are gone, they're not coming back.
That was Tom Bie giving us his favorite magazine and best tip if you want to get published in the Drake magazine. This is episode 162 of the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going today? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. If you get a chance, head over to wetflyswing.com/Facebook and join our community to ask a question for an upcoming guest. Tom Bie, the editor of one of the most influential fly fishing magazines, is here to share his story. Tom and I jump into a range of topics, including how the idea of the Drake came to be during his days as a ski lifty, a little bit on sweet boats on the Middle Fork of the Salmon, widespread panic, the group, and even a little on Donald Trump Jr. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors. SoFly Gear, headed up by 17-year-old James Carlin of the U.S. Youth Fly Fishing Team, has a buttery soft, quick-drying line that I have been loving. Head over to wetflyswing.com/SoFly to support James and the podcast today. That's wetflyswing.com/SOFLY. We are also supported by the Fly Fishing and Tying Journal, has an exceptional fall edition out right now. Head over to wetflyswing.com/FTJ to support Craig and the gang right now. That's wetflyswing.com/FTJ. Really excited to share this one today with you. So without further ado, here's Tom Bie from the Drake magazine. How's it going, Tom?
Great, Dave. How are you this morning?
Good. Yeah, it's good to have you on here to dig into a little bit of your background and some on the Drake magazine. Obviously you've got one of the leading magazines, and I know you've been out there a lot. I've been listening to a couple of podcasts you were on to get a little bit more of your background. So I'm interested to dig into it, but maybe start us off. I want to dig into the Drake. I know you've talked about, but talk about how it came to be and kind of start from wherever you want to start. How did this all come to be? Because you've done a lot of stuff in your life.
I have. That's what happens when you start getting old. I had the idea for a while before I started it. I would say, well, I spent one season after college. I was down in Arizona briefly, and then I moved up to Jackson. This was in the early 90s, and my first winter after a summer in Jackson was in Park City, Utah, where I was a lifty. And anybody who's ever been a lift op knows that job gives you a lot of time to just think. Because you sit, at least when you're in the top and you don't have to load skiers onto a chair, you just sit in a little box up there and think to yourself. So that was really where I started jotting down a lot of ideas. I've always been a writer and knew that I wanted to be a writer. But there's a little bit of sad side to this story as of this weekend. A huge influence for me was Powder magazine. And that came to ski towns in the mid 90s, and it was just an event. People just loved getting that magazine. That was very influential. Over the weekend, the parent company that owns Powder, bike, snowboarder, skateboarder, ceased business, or at least put it on pause. Not that they weren't actually doing well and fairly profitable, but the company that owns Men's Journal and used to own a bunch of tabloids and got itself into some debt issues, I believe. But so who knows all the background of it, but but it was almost next year would have been Powder's 50th
Jeez.
anniversary. I spent 3 years as the editor of that magazine, and it really influenced the Drake a lot. But in terms of the first seeding of ideas was really a lot of lift op time there, and what would have been, I guess, 93, 94, that winter in Park City. And then 4 years later, started it in Jackson.
That's it. Gosh, and I've heard, and I know a lot of the background there, the skiing. And you were a skier, right? Or were you snowboarding? Did you do both?
Yeah, I was a bad skier, which is amazing because I eventually became editor of Powder, but I was never really very good at skiing.
No kidding.
I mean, I didn't grow up. I mean, I went to Mount Hood and skied a few times in high school, but super flaily, and that's not good snow to learn how to ski in anyway. It's almost East Coasty as far as the water content and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But if you want to learn to ski, just like any other activity, you move to a ski town. And I did it in Jackson and in Park City. And by the time I left Jackson in the late 90s, I still felt like I was not a very good skier because I lived and skied in Jackson. But of course, if I went with my friends who were Flatlanders, I mean, they thought I was good. But compared to that bar in Jackson Hole, but what I was good at is ski towns. I just really got that culture, one, from having lived in them, of course, but also I was a newspaper reporter in Jackson, covered sports, and I feel like I really got what being a ski bum in the 90s was all about, and that helped me in my career more so than my skiing ability. That's for sure.
That's right. And it's interesting, and this has come up a number of times talking to people that have, are leaders in the fly fishing industry, but there's a good background in snowboarding. And I think it was Marty Sherman. He was talking about how, they were they were bums up on the mountain too. And his boss, right. His boss owned, part of the lodge up on Mount Hood or whatever, but basically he fished on the side, and that's how it all came to be. And I mean, what do you think? I mean, the snowboarding and the powder and all that stuff, is it, when you look at your magazine with the Drake, is it pretty much, how similar is it to the style of what they were doing when they were still going?
Very similar. And I think I've made this analogy before, but as far as fly fishing goes, the act of casting a fly rod, maybe a spey rod in particular, is similar to telemark skiing to me. And if skiing, regular alpine skiing, is spin fishing, or then I would and you want to make it just one step harder, then that's kind of what telemark skiing was, and that became big in the 90s in these ski towns. It's kind of faded a lot now, in part because they've made the boots a lot lighter that you can use for either or, and right. it was just that the feel of a telemark turn, when you do it right, is similar to a great spey cast. Even if you don't catch a fish, there's a lot of value, and you get joy out of just making a good cast and working your way down the river. And I felt like telemark skiing just got you further down in the snow, and there's just a feel about the turn. And snowboarding was really a lot like that too. I didn't do a lot of snowboarding. I did it when I had skier friends who came to town who really didn't ski, because I was not good at snowboarding, so I could.
All right.
I wasn't waiting for them then. We were kind of about the same. But yeah, I think as far as the culture goes, you're exactly right. I heard Marty mention that, I think, in your podcast, and you have so many of these ski towns are trout towns, right?
That's true.
Ski patrolmen are oftentimes guides in the summer. The ski instructors oftentimes guides in the summer, and it's just a great way to, if you were in a town that had both, it gave you a decent off season each year, and then and the patrolmen are the coolest guys in town. That's always, or women now, a lot more of them now, but you have both, and it was a great way to earn a living in a ski town.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just and just outdoors, right? I mean, you've been
Right.
outdoor writers, and I mean, obviously that's not a easy thing to do, and you've managed to make the Drake a full-time gig now, which is also amazing. I mean, can you take us to that point where, because I know there is a long history there where you were with Powder and you were, and you have a journalist, a background in journalism. But eventually the Drake became your full-time gig. Can you take us to that moment and tell us like how that all felt?
Yeah, I could take you to that moment. It was fall of 2008.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, not the best time to try to be
Oh, that's right.
growing anything. So my timing was, in some ways, you couldn't imagine it being worse. But I left Powder. So I had been in the ski industry. I had 2 years at skiing and 3 years at Powder, and I was just doing the Drake once a year in the off season from the ski publishing. So basically, every spring I put out an issue. So I left Powder in spring of 2007 and did do a second issue that year. And then the next year, the wheels fell off the economy, and I was out there talking to advertisers about taking Drake to 3 times a year, which I did in 2009 and 2010. And looking back on it, it seems ridiculously dumb, but I had nothing to lose, really. I mean, I didn't have any money at the time, really. And the Drake offered something that the other magazines at that time didn't offer. Part of it was just affordability because it was still fairly small. And it was just different. But I still was doing some more freelancing on the side and this and that. And I was living in Fort Collins. I lived cheaply. I wasn't bumming, but I didn't have a lot of expenses or anything like that. But that 2009, it was twice a year, and then I took it to 3 times a year that next year, 2010. And 2011, I went to 4 times a year. So 2007, 2008, it was 2 each year. And then 2009, 2010, it was 3. And 2011 on, it's been my full-time job.
That's cool.
So 11 years now.
11 years, yeah, and I want to jump into a little bit on the Drake, and I know some people definitely, we could dig into a little bit more of what it's all about, but I just want to hit on one thing I think is really interesting in your background, and probably shed some light on the person you are. But you had like a little stint in the Army, right? Back, I think it was a couple of, I mean, because when I think of the Army, it's interesting because I know a little bit of your story, and for some reason Johnny Cash always pops in my head. Totally different story, but I mean the guy, right? I mean, different time, but he always had this dream of, I think the music was there, and he went to the Army for a short time,
right.
And I think he wrote Folsom Prison Blues. It comes out. And that's it. Now he's becoming, and that's his dream. Did you? I mean, why did you go in the Army, and then what did it do for you?
I went in the Army to get money for college. To be honest, I mean, it was. And Oregon isn't a big military, state at all. And my father fought in Korea, and so he was in the war, but there wasn't any sort of military. Like there was no pressure on me. I didn't have a bunch of friends or relatives. I really didn't know anybody at the time that had been in.
There was no war. There was no war going on, right?
No. It was. There was some. There was still terrorism taking place over in Europe and things like that. But overall, compared to the years since, it was peacetime service.
Yeah.
And but it was at that time the Army had a 2-year enlistment. I mean, it's always a 6-year commitment, but it was 2 years active, which they've had off and on over the years. I'm not sure whether they still have it, but at the time, I'm 18 years old. 2 years seems like a long time, but honestly, I don't know that I was also ready to go to college. I mean, I was a good student. I wasn't a great student in high school, but my sister was going to college at the time, and she was going to a private school that was pretty expensive, and it would have been tough financially. I don't know that my folks could have done it or whatever, and so And it was probably one of the smartest things I've ever done. I mean, I absolutely, had I gone to college right after high school, I think there's a fairly decent chance I would have gone for a year or two and then gone up for a summer of fishing in Alaska and never gone back or something, maybe.
Yep.
But it was 2 years in the Army. It was also 2 years I got to live in Europe. And I was based in Germany. And I fired a shoulder-fired missile system. And it was kind of a really cool experience in that regard, in terms of just having been in the service, and exposed me to other people from across the U.S. that I never would have otherwise been in contact with, much less lived with and worked with on a daily basis. And you're talking about 40% to 50%, non-white,
Right.
which was really good for me because Oregon is very white. And it was, and you're not just going to work with them, and you're living forward to a dorm, and you're spending weeks out in the field. And so it was just a really, really great experience. And then I got out and had money for Oregon State. So that was the main reason I went into the Army, but it ended up getting me all kinds of things beyond that.
That's it. And then you went into journalism at OSU, and then you kind of slowly connect to, and you moved eventually. What was remind me again on the magazines? What was the first, you moved to Jackson? Is that what happened?
Yeah. So the magazine was in 98, but I was in Jackson 6 years before I started the magazine. That was, I worked, started up there in the May of 1992. And I was a rafting guide for 3 or 4 of those early years, and still kept doing it before I became a fishing guide. I would split up my summer up there and, raft guide until whatever, end of June or early July. And then in spring of 98, I had been assembling the Drake for a year, but I was working for the newspaper, and they agreed to print this thing for me. And it was a super small print run of 5,000. And to be honest, Dave, I don't know if I even really thought I would do a second one. I had no idea about distribution, or I had no business plan, didn't have a bunch of money. And so, but I did do a second one. I was also in Jackson, didn't really have the money to do it, so I had to sell some things to make that happen. And then I got a job at Paddler Magazine and Steamboat, and they helped me publish it for a couple of years. Just kind of I basically told them they could keep the money if they wanted to add that. So it was a 7th issue of Paddler Magazine.
Oh, wow.
In 2002. Or see, 2000. No, 2001. 2000, I did not do an issue because broke. And then 2001 and 2002 was it was a 7th issue of the Paddler Magazine, which was the Drake. It was just this fishing magazine that Paddler did, and they got the ad revenue, and they maybe got $5,000 or $10,000 or something out of it. But I have told the story once before, at least. But I think the interesting thing about that is what Paddler Magazine, what that got me, other than just my first real job at a magazine, not an excellent boss, and another cool ski town. But what it got the Drake was on the shelves of Barnes and Noble, which I never would have been able to do as an annual publication, right? I have no muscle, no whatever. But they put it out there as this, 7th issue of Paddler, and then they had data on the sale, and it sold pretty well. Wow. And so I was able, when I left there, they kept carrying the magazine, and I would not have had a chance to do that. I mean, my boss and editor up there is Eugene Buchanan. He's still in Steamboat. It's a really, really good dude. And if it wasn't for that, I mean, you just look at all these little things along the way. I've always had faith and confidence in my writing, but beyond that, as far as, I have a lot of determination and all that, but I don't have a lot of business skills and never really did. And so I definitely got a lot of breaks along the way, just lucky breaks, and you
Yeah.
get your name in front of the right people, and just certain things happen. You look back on, you're like, that was huge. And it was
That
like
is.
happenstance, you know?
That's cool. That's cool. What would be, I mean, if there are a lot of these things, you know, that came to make the Drake. I mean, if the Drake didn't come to be, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
That's a good question. I think I would certainly be writing, but I
Yeah.
would probably be freelancing and have another job.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I could have been successful in a number of probably, real estate and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I maybe would have ended up like corporate communications guy or something.
Right.
I mean, as much as that makes my stomach turn at this point.
Yep.
I was at Oregon State. I had a couple of good internships. While still in school, I was at Portland General Electric in Portland. I don't know if you remember, but they had it was the World Trade Center downtown. They were in that building. I had that one summer, and then TriMet the next summer. So 2 really good internships that showed me, on the one hand, a very private stockholder held company, and then another very public company. And then I basically volunteered, maybe got $5 an hour or something right after Oregon State. I went down to Arizona and worked for a couple PR firms. So I did a pretty good job of like checking off okay, I know what I don't want to do. Beep,
Yeah.
I was a mortgage loan officer for 4 months in Arizona before I went to Jackson.
Wow.
And that was the biggest, easiest one to check off. But just like anything else in your life, I learned a lot about borrowing money for a home and just that short amount of time. But I don't know. I probably would have been in some corporate facility or, job and been not happy.
And not happy. which a lot of people do. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people that are doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Or, I mean, in fairness, if it wouldn't have happened for me when it happened, I may have just continued. Maybe I would have bought a small rafting company, or I don't know, something that kept me outdoors. That I really don't know that I could have stayed indoors doing that sort of thing. But
that's awesome.
But I'm happy that I'm doing what I'm doing.
Totally.
I still love it as much as I ever did.
Yeah. Well, what's the long term? I mean, I guess you're, like you're saying, or you're in your mid 50s or getting close to that.
Yeah.
What's the long term? I look at it's been a long, a good ride. How does the next 10 years look like when you look out at the magazine? Kind of more of the same, or how do you go forward?
I don't think I can just do more of the same, because the nature of print and in some ways it's making a little comeback just because people are so untrusting of social media and I think we've all seen some magazines that have gone away, and your alternative is
blogging,
clickbait online. It's just the online reading experience is still, for the most part, horrid, unless it is New York or New York Times, something that can afford to not have the clickbait crap on the bottom. But almost all of it does, and it's just a horrendous reading experience. And most people, there's just a lot of people that have kind of come back to having a different look at print, but I do think it's got to be a little different model business-wise. And mine, the Drake, actually has been for quite a while, in terms of getting quite a bit more of my income from newsstand sales and single copy sales and subscription than advertising. Like percentage-wise, it's certainly more advertising, but it's not 95% advertising, which is most big magazines are, and they give away their subscriptions for airline miles or whatever.
Oh, wow.
And then that comes back to bite you,
Yeah.
When you lose a few advertisers, and suddenly you're out of business because you rely so heavily on that. But I've never really discounted the magazine and still see a healthy sell-through on newsstands and things like that. And I can't honestly say that that's by design necessarily, but I did see the problems with, I mean, I worked for two of the biggest media companies on earth at the time. It was Time Inc. at Skiing Magazine, and they owned everything. I mean, just hundreds of titles, right? It was AOL Time Warner. That was the parent company. And then Prime Media out of Powder, always New York based, always tons of titles. And you just saw some of the problems with being too reliant on ad revenue. Even though I'm very fortunate to have good
you do
ad support in the industry. You know, it's great.
Yeah, I was just thumbing through the summer edition, and yeah, you've got pretty much all of the biggest companies, the biggest and best companies, right? That are,
and a lot of them have been there for 15 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's I don't shortchange the editorial. I mean, that's still what it comes down to, and I do think that maybe, and this could all change tomorrow, right? Who knows what the hell, especially this year, what's going on. But I think that we're all learning quite a bit, we all meaning like in this publishing world, of that there's a sweet spot, size-wise and niche-wise. Like, in addition to Powder, bike, snowboarder, skateboarder going away last Friday, I think if you had any one of those individual titles yourself, you could make it profitable.
You'd be okay.
I don't think any of those titles were actually losing money. I just think the parent company was looking for an excuse to get. I mean, the Powder was roughly the same size as the Drake, a little bigger, but just hardcore dedicated readers, and who really appreciated the print version. But those are niche titles. Also, over the weekend, it was announced that Field and Stream and Sports Afield were no longer being printed.
Whoa!
I don't know if you heard that.
No,
but
I
didn't. The title, they were bought by some company that was going to do some sort of, digital assets or some sort of crap. But I have to admit, as much as I read those titles when I was a young kid as well, that doesn't surprise me, because those really aren't vertical titles. And it seemed like the past couple decades, so they'd been almost all about, survivalist gun and maybe some bass fishing.
So Field and Stream, you mentioned vertical titles. What do you mean by that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just mean like a vertical title, meaning just fly fishing, just skiing, just snowboarding. The Field and Stream and Sports Afield and Outdoor Life, those are horizontal titles. They cover hunting, fishing, not as horizontal as, say, Outside magazine.
Yeah, Outside, right.
But I just think that you need to be, right now, much more niche than those magazines in order to really hit that passionate group.
Yeah.
But I know we had Zach on from Swing the Fly. Yeah. Maybe there's a too niche.
We had that conversation.
So and maybe the Drake is just lucky to have fallen into that kind of perfect size niche. Yeah. I mean, I work really hard to make the editorial strong, and it's been my background, and I've done it my whole life, and I take it really seriously, and I know that that's a huge part of it. But all that could be great, and if there's no place to distribute the magazine, or it turns too many people off, then it's still not going to make it, right? But I think I just feel fortunate. The fly fishing industry is also much more friendly to retail sales of fly fishing. I don't know I think that this summer people realize how lucky we are in this pandemic. I mean, who knew how this was all going to unfold? Yeah. but for all the struggles that everybody, other than, of course, the travel booking agencies, the especially the international ones and the Yellow Dogs and Frontiers and ones like that, obviously very much struggled. But beyond that, almost every manufacturer I've spoken to and fly shop, they had record months from June to now, and you see it on the river. I mean, they're everywhere. But I do think some of that is just the strength of the retail fly shops. I mean, people, you almost have to go into a fly shop for something. Flies, tippet, floating, information, and you don't have to go into the pro ski shop.
Oh, no.
Once a year to get your skis tuned.
Yeah.
There's just so much more of a community in a fly shop than there is almost any other, specialist.
Is that because it's harder? I think a paddler too, like paddling. I've had some friends that were, kayakers, and I mean, is fly fishing, you just need more help with fly fishing?
Well, part of the problem with whitewater kayaking is that everyone in the sport is one wet exit away from quitting it forever.
Oh,
it's
really?
Just scary.
Oh, like the time you almost die and then you're done.
Yes. It's just far more dangerous than fly fishing is. And I'm talking about just whitewater kayaking at, high end, like above 3+, 4+.
Did you do that?
I did. I was at Paddler Magazine for a couple of years, and most of my background was rafting. But I got into it, but kind of like my skiing, I never got beyond a 3+ boater with confidence. And I ran a couple class 5 rivers with people who were way better than me. And I didn't even enjoy it. I was so scared.
No.
I wasn't confident enough in my abilities. But you bring up a great example, because whitewater kayaking is a sport you can look to. That was booming in the early 2000s. I mean, it was on every commercial. Theo Berman paddling off a waterfall, and the magazines went away.
Wow.
The videos went away, and the sport went away. I mean, it was certainly in part because stand-up paddleboarding was coming on, and you have sit-on-top kayaks that, every overweight dude in the country can go out and sit on and put a 6-pack on and convince his wife he's out exercising or whatever.
Yeah.
But they were really, really popular. But whitewater kayaking, it also had the problem of at its peak, technical whitewater boat was $1,000, $1,200, and then you had some engineers come along and enter the sport and say, well, I know I'm sitting in $80 worth of plastic here, so I'm just going to manufacture these and sell them at Sam's Club for $200 or whatever. And there was a lot of reasons. But I mean, I think fly fishing is, to your point, yes, they may have to go in there and ask information. And yes, it is. It can be challenging to learn on some levels, and you can get overwhelmed with but you're not going to go out and die.
No.
It's not. It's not scary like extreme skiing or extreme kayaking is, and you can start it at my age.
Although I will say, if you do it enough, Tom, I've definitely been in a couple places trying to get to fishing spots where I literally have almost died. You know what I mean? But that's more extreme. Sure. I think once you get there.
But you didn't have to go down.
No.
It's not. You're not in a kayak, and the only way out is downstream.
That's true.
You can't climb around.
That's true. Through killer. Yeah.
But I mean, that's part of what I love about kayaking too. But just fly fishing, sure. I've probably come closer to dying in fly fishing than I ever did skiing, kayaking. Just putting yourself in those kind of questionable wading situations and whatnot. But that was my own kind of dumb decision making.
That's cool. No, I love that. I love that conversation just with the niches and talking about the Drake and the bigger conglomerations, because there's a lot of that going on. And I mean, the Drake, so you guys still are, I mean, you're just a single. And it's funny because I think back of, I had Elliot Adler on way back quite a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I had Elliot on, and I think it was, he was a podcaster. I try to, where I can, interview other fellow fly fishing podcasts just to, connect. And it was great because we talked about you and we talked about the magazine. At one point in that interview, I said, we were talking about the same thing about the drake growing and getting bigger. And I said something like, well, is there any worry that the drake's ever going to become like corporate big? And he was like, he stopped me right away. He's like, I do not think the drake is ever, it's basically Tom and there's a couple other people. I mean, so you guys are a small shop, right?
Yes. I mean, as small as you can get.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had various other contributors. Jeff Mueller was a managing editor for a time. Don Weaver has for 7+ years, coming up on 8, been the person that runs the show behind in terms of the circulation and ad traffic flow and all these sorts of things. And I've always farmed out the website, and the design is subcontracted.
Yep.
So the number of full-time employees I've had has never been more than 2, and I'll bring in someone like Elliot. Actually, that's giving me more credit. Elliot brought himself in and told me that he was going to do this podcast, which I really was not. I don't know if he told you the story, but
no, I
wasn't much of a podcast person.
Yeah.
And he had done 2 or 3 of them before I even listened to the thing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so good.
Yeah.
He was he took it to a different level in terms of the type
production.
It was totally different than what you do or what a lot of people, in terms of going out and talking to all kinds of different people and splicing it together and putting, it was more like an NPR sort of thing.
That's exactly what it was. I mean, he comes, and the reason he has that is that, part of it is that his brother produces he's connected with one of the other big podcasts. I can't remember the name of it now, but yeah, he comes from a production family, and he knows, and the thing about that is I asked him, so what do you do with the drake? How long does it take you? And I think he said it took him 30 to 40 hours a week to produce the episode, compared to this, which takes me probably 5 hours, to do. The interview style just makes it a little easier to do it. Right.
Yeah. And I think that he struggled with even finding a little sound system or place where he could go and make it sound good enough, because the office I had at the time was right next to the road.
Yeah.
Like that. But yes, he was very, very talented and had a different standard for himself as far as how to go about the process of it. And people ask me what happened to Adler, and I'm like, well, what always happens when you hire a talented person, he gets hired away by somebody that's actually paying him real money to be a podcast, so he that's what he's doing now. But
yeah, that's cool. No, I think it's I remember when he was finishing up and wrapping things up with you. Well, I guess he's still kind of technically assistant editor, right? He's on there, or he can come back.
Helps. He can do all of it. Like, he's a good editor. He's a good writer.
Huh.
The podcast thing is his love, and he's making good money now. But of course, it's corporate. Some of them are commercials, right? But yeah, he still does. He looks over feature stories for me in smaller news pieces. And that's a whole different skill, whether you're writing or editing. Someone that can put together 600 words can't necessarily put together 3,000, and vice versa. I have good writers that just cannot write anything less than 2,000 words for some reason, or 3,000. So it's cool to see his broad range of talent.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Here you go. FTJ Angler has a great fall edition that's out right now. You can find Lucas Stevens, who visits Winston Fly Rods in the fall edition for an insider look at and a rare interview with writer Ted Leeson. someone I hope to have on the podcast soon. Patrick Wall pays homage to Harry Lemire's tied-in-hand Atlantic salmon flies displayed in the Marguerite Salmon Museum. Boots Allen takes us to the pond with a masterclass in Stillwater. Dennis Dobble travels to Scotland in search of Atlantic salmon. Plus, FTJ Deputy Editor Henry Hughes with a mysterious fly fishing story, and Nora Etsy with her poem No Business. I would love it if you can press pause right now. Head over to wetflyswing.com/FTJ to subscribe so you get the next edition right to your mailbox. That's wetflyswing.com/FTJ. SoFlyGear.com, led by Chief Apparel Guru and U.S. Youth Fly Fishing All-Star James Carlin, has a clothing line you're going to love. SoFly's mission to produce clothes that look good, perform well, can be worn on and off the water, and most importantly, are manufactured under rigorously sustainable methods. How do they do it? Bamboo, in a single word, a fabric that is buttery soft to the touch, durable, sun-resistant, and embossed with original designs and artwork. I've been wearing the SoFly hoodie on my last couple of steelhead trips, and it's been a game changer. Whether hot or cold, wet or dry, I've been feeling perfect in pretty much all conditions. I haven't taken this thing off. I mean, it's been pretty awesome. Head over to wetflyswing.com/SoFly to get started today. That's wetflyswing.com/SOFLY. Well, let's jump in. You know, it's funny because I remember way back I also talked to John Gierach, had him on, and I remember I got some flack on that one because we talked a lot about writing and less about the fishing, and I think some people reached out to me and said, "What are you doing? We want to hear more fishing." So we got to hear a little bit on the magazine. You know, the Drake. Maybe dig into a little bit of what it's about. Sure. And maybe you could just start us off because I think most people probably have read it. You know, there's probably some raving fans listening as well in here. But, you know, can you just talk about maybe what makes that magazine a little bit different than everything else? Because, I mean, and maybe it's not. I mean, I know there are some other ones. There's the Fly Fish Journal. There's some other really great magazines. But why does the Drake kind of seem like a leader out there?
Well, the Fly Fish Journal is similar in some of its literary approach, and that was really the first difference that the Drake had. I mean, 4 or 5 of the departments in the magazine have been there since the beginning, and one of those is Tippets, which is just typically a 1-page or 2-page short essay, and that was really the thing that set the Drake apart early on. The magazines in the late 90s, fly fishing magazines, were really not doing much of anything except for telling you how to fly fish. Yeah. Some way or two, you know, but almost all of it was tips, which obviously does not have a long future when the internet came around. So that was a big part of it. But then also actual reporting. I mean, I'd say now that is what differentiates the Drake more than just about anything. I mean, there's little things I like to think make a difference in terms of, you know, the photo captions. You put time and effort into every little thing, and you make sure that whatever the worst thing is in the magazine is really close to whatever's the best thing in the magazine. Yeah. By that, I mean, I always had a theory, like, what if someone picks up the magazine and reads the worst story in there, and that's their impression? Yeah. Like, if you look at it and think that's not that good, then it shouldn't be in there to begin with. So, but I think in terms of the essay style, and travel writing, I hate the word travel writing, but stories about travel and profiles and things like that, Fly Fish Journal does a great job with that. They have an awful lot of the essay, but they have a high standard of writers and things like that as well. And then you need to have some how to, where to, sort of more entry-ish level out there. And I think Fly Fisherman does a great job with that. There used to be a lot more, of course. There was American Angler, and there's Fly Rod and Reel, all those when I started the magazine a lot of those have not lasted.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your opinion, but
Yeah.
there was, I think, many of those style, and it was just too easy to Google that sort of information up and have it in front of you. And now with YouTube, I mean, it's just, I mean, I learn everything from YouTube.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to replace the string on my weed eater if it wasn't for, and so that, as far as trying to explain that in a writing thing, I just don't see that being any comparison.
How do you filter through, similar to the thing you're saying, like, and I agree with what you've said before, that, the Drake, obviously, you get that it's going to be quality compared to, say, you just read a random blog. And there are some amazing blogs out there. I've interviewed some people that are great blogs, but there's a lot of junk too. I mean, how do you, like, compare that, like YouTube, right? You go to YouTube, how do you filter through the junk on YouTube to find what you need?
Right. Well, very specific search terms when it comes to YouTube. I mean, I think most, especially younger generation, people are able, you can find anything out on there. And I think that's been a boon to.
Yeah. Like fly tying, for example, right?
Yeah. Fly tying. I know it's a big part of your background, and I'm not a big tyer, but if I wanted to tie something, I could go in there and watch. I don't know how it would look, but I could learn how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was like Jack Dennis VHS tapes, right?
That's
that
right.
was what you were watching back in the day. But I think it's a question about how much of the other sort of stuff you put online. Like for a publisher, for me, I mean, the problem with the online, maybe not necessarily online magazines, but the too many times that becomes volume over quality. So you just throw stuff on there because you're trying to it's all about the clicks and the traffic and so you don't have any stories that really have the sort of depth to them. You don't have analysis. You don't have the research. You don't have all the things that make a story worth reading. And what I want to have in the magazine is, if somebody's coming to the end of a 3, 4, 5,000 word story and still wants more.
Yeah.
That's the sign of a well written and, maybe more importantly, well edited piece. And the magazine, I get a few magazines here at the house, but the New Yorker is by far my favorite. And it's just one of those magazines that I don't even really care about the subject matter sometimes. It's just so well written and researched and edited that it's just a joy to read. And it's easy to read. I mean, as an editor, my number one role, and any of the contributors who have written for me over the years know this, clarity above all else.
Yeah.
If you lose your reader on the second sentence and they take that off ramp and are gone, they're not coming back.
Yep.
It has to be clear. It has to make sense to people. And that's a big one of my guiding flaws. That doesn't mean simple. It doesn't mean long. It means the editing is every bit as important or more so than is what it comes down to.
Yeah, the editing. And again, we come back to that because, well, Zach mentioned that too, because he doesn't come from a Swing the Fly, a background in editing, and he probably relies or has relied more on his writers, maybe. But yeah, it's an interesting point because you do all this work, and if you have a good editor, which obviously you spent your life in this field, so you know it pretty well. I mean, what else? So when you have people coming in, I mean, the articles, maybe we just take that for an example. So you have somebody sends you an article, it looks pretty good. Can you take us through that process of how it, you get it and then it becomes in the next edition of the magazine, or is that a pretty lengthy process?
It depends on the length of the story.
What's your average length? I know you have different shorter stuff, but what do you think is the average length of?
I mean, the feature stories are typically 2,500 to 3,500, somewhere in there. So really long for feature stories. They can run longer, but if it's less than 2,000, it's probably not a feature story.
So like in the summer edition, you had a couple, like the bear attack one, right? Was that kind of considered?
Yeah, but that was longer, but that was a news story. That was up front. So that's,
right.
Scuddlebutt section, that's where I try to have the most news breaking,
okay,
sort of. I mean, this issue we're doing a lot on the Oregon fires.
Oh,
You know,
so the scuttlebutt is kind of the break. So if you had like a conservation issue that was hot topic, you might have that.
sure,
Yep.
exactly. And Dave, that's the hardest section to fill.
Why is that?
And if reader or if listeners to your show are interested in pitching the Drake, pitch me a news story that is reported and researched and written like a news story. That's it. I mean, and I've seen some magazines have just completely stopped doing it because they think, well, that's an online thing. Powder, the Bible for skiers, which I love, made a decision a year or two ago to stop doing any news because that was for the website or something that people aren't interested in. And I could not disagree more. I mean, right now, I think that's one of the responsibilities of vertical publications. I mean, you don't know. I had a letter from a letter from the editor. I don't have a recent copy here for me, but it was a letter from the editor, or a letter to the editor in this summer issue. I think it was the first one I ran, and it said something like, it's interesting that I can learn more about my local watersheds from your magazine than I can from a local newspaper.
I saw that one. That was in the summer.
That was a great letter. It's because people, these newspapers can't cover those sorts of issues all the time, and they certainly can't give it the in-depth time. I mean, they have a editor there making $35,000 a year, and they, and all anybody watches nationally, it's either like for or against Trump. That's it. That's 100% of what you're seeing in the news, and everything else gets buried. Yeah. And so it's hard to find those people now because not as many kids got opportunities in newspapers because there's not as many of them around. But at the same time, if you acquire and develop that skill, you are a valuable asset to any magazine publisher or any, you can, if you know how to do an interview and then know what to do with those quotes and how to work them into a story, because I could write a news story that's 3 or 4 years old and people would be intrigued by it because it hadn't been covered, Yeah. I mean, I like it to be as updated as possible, but you know what I'm saying? There's just cool. An awful lot of news out there that is not being made. And the Tippets essays, I get tons of them. That is the easiest to fill. And it's great because that means, you asked me the question earlier, how does that process go? If I can see that it's a Tippett essay, I'll start reading it and I will know usually within the first 2 or 3 sentences whether or not I want to.
Oh, wow. You can tell whether it's good or bad.
Yes. I mean, and that may sound like, I'll typically read past that just in case maybe they really get rolling a little bit later, or maybe they have a great unique voice that just needs to be edited down. But a lot of those essays I get, a lot of them are from people I've never heard from before. People think I don't have an in almost every issue. I would bet far more often than not, I run an essay that has from someone who's never been published in the magazine before.
Yeah, that's cool.
Just send them to me. And those are never assigned, ever. They just come in. So in that respect, that's a much easier hole to fill. So if I was just interested in filling the magazine, I would remove the news section, run twice as many Tippets, and be done with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Would make my job way easier.
Right.
But I don't care how great of a writer you are. If you have too many of just the sort of touchy-feely, essay writing like someone's going to have in their bedside journal, then it's a poetry magazine or something. I don't know. You want to have some hard news in there as well, I think.
That is cool. Yeah, things were running through my head as you were talking there just about, the news, but that is such a critical, especially this day and age, and I think in newspapers, the newspapers we had that stretch where a lot of them went down as well.
Right.
So you lost a lot of that. Now a lot of it's on to online, and you got, But still, the news in the magazine, I hadn't thought about that, but that makes, a lot of sense that you can still write a good article and have quotes and do a good story. So I'll definitely highlight that for any listeners for sure to check in with you.
The other thing, I think you will see some of these small newspapers are trying to figure it out still, like the ones that have survived. And you couldn't have dreamt of having a paywall on a local newspaper before, but it's slowly working its way down. The big Wall Street Journal, New York Times, they had the coronavirus coverage during as free for everyone.
Yep. And
that brought in a lot of readers that then suddenly started paying, I want to read other parts of the magazine. What is it? $2 a month? Done, And but when someone like these fires is a perfect example, you want to know what's going on in your town, you should be able to go to if not a local paper, then at least a local website or something. And then you've got either the traffic that you're trying to sell ads off of, or these paywalls that are popping up. And and they're not much, but that dynamic and that business model is changing. And you're never going to see that print magazine come back like it did. But I think you will see some local websites with actual reporters. Especially these fast, those fires it was a different story every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So trying to keep up with that, you had to be online, but it was only those people that were on the ground there in that area that could adequately cover it. So right. I think, it sucks that it takes a natural disaster like that to make people pay attention. But I'm hopeful that reporting as a skill or as a valued commodity will, in fact, come back.
That's right. Can you give us a little short, is that coming out in the next edition or on the fire story?
It says fall issue. I'm closing
it's right in the fall. Yeah. What's the, so is that out right now?
No. Should be
out.
Part of the reason it isn't is because of the fires.
What is can you give us a snippet on just that news, article that you're putting out there on the fires? The synopsis of that?
Sure. I actually have one of each in this one. The news is written by Stephen Hawley, who also wrote the Bear piece you were talking about, a very good, very talented reporter. And I was brief aside, I had to fly out to Oregon myself. I have a place in Lincoln City, and Lincoln County was under evacuate. That was September 9th. I had landed in Minneapolis to do a bass and pike story, which is also in this issue. But luckily, there was another writer that was there because I was at the airport 20 minutes. My phone was blown up, and I turned around and got on a plane and flew back out. Flew to Denver, then flew to Portland that same night to get to Echo Mountain fire, which is in Lincoln County. And it wasn't on the national news because there was 10 fires farther south and east that were 10 times the size.
Yeah.
But it still took out 100 homes, structures, northern part of town, both sides of the Salmon River coming into the town of Lincoln City. And I'm on the south end. So my place was luckily spared. It was just some wind damage, but I couldn't even get into it for a couple of days because they had 101 closed. And it was just like, so the magazine has the story really mainly on the Clackamas also got hit up around Portland.
Yep.
But my main emphasis was the going north to south, that North Santiam, McKenzie, North Umpqua, and Rogue. And just crazy coincidental that really all four of those, not so much the North Umpqua as far as towns, but the other three really had two small communities each that just got torched to the ground.
Mm.
And they're the sort of things, let me just choke up just thinking about it because the amount of time that we've all spent, you're an Oregonian, you grew up, you always, you stop at that little market, right? You get your gas at the gas. It's just these tiny little couple hundred people maybe. And these are not the kind of people that, some of them have insurance and can rebuild and stuff, but talent in Phoenix, Oregon, in a trailer house next to I-5.
Yeah.
They're not rebuilding.
No.
It's just so sad, and it happened so fast. It was 24 hours, and these places went through. So, and heavily influenced, guides live in these communities. And you've seen a lot of the fundraising online. The Sawyer Oars is down there, Loon is down there, Flywater's down there along Southern Oregon, but the Mackenzie east of Eugene is a little less known. The Caddis Fly Shop's a long time and has outfitters. But you've been in Oregon forever. You know these things. I mean, but that's essentially the story. And then I also have a essay that I'm running from a guide who's been out there, and this is a North Umpqua piece, which it wasn't really towns, but they're just more people are familiar with that river corridor than any of them, and it's just in really, really bad shape.
Yeah, and I was just going to note, we talked about this, I think, the last episode, but Frank Moore, who also is an amazing person, I think, lost his house, and there's a GoFundMe. I think a couple sites set up to help, them out, which, a lot of it, I had a couple friends that were evacuated, but nothing really hit home until I really heard Frank Moore, because I drove down to Frank's house and interviewed him, and
you did.
I sat in that house on the North Umpqua, and it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it, because it was such a powerful, his story and to think about where they're at. But, so yeah, it is. It's and there's also an underlying hinge, again, you could talk about, climate change, right? I mean, that freak windstorm.
Sure.
There's probably,
we do.
You know what I mean? The hot weather, we're turning more like California. Yeah. I mean, there's a climate change backdrop on that too.
This isn't the first time for some of these communities, and there's been decades of logging that people have different opinions about, the mismanagement and the where these homes were able to build. I mean, yes, it's endless, that topic, but that's why I asked someone like Steve to do it, because he's really good at that.
If somebody wanted to pick up the Drake, and they, where is the best place to just go if they wanted to subscribe or grab a copy of that next one coming?
Well, I always suggest first them going to their local fly shop, or the closest one to them, because I love sending them into shops to get the magazine, because like all fly fishermen, most of them spend more money then when they get the magazine. But beyond that, they're still at all the Barnes and Nobles, a lot of bookstores and grocery stores. I didn't used to have them in there, but there's a couple different distribution companies I work with that put them out there in a wide variety. I'm surprised sometimes when I get emails from people. I found it at Albertsons or whatever.
That's awesome.
I'm not exactly sure where some of those places are, but still, it's the fly shops are crucial to like my distribution, and I love sending people in there to do it. I did want to tell you, I was in your dad's shop back.
Oh, really?
Day. Yeah, I mean, it was there really wasn't much else in East Portland. I mean,
that's pretty cool.
This was maybe early like 2000s or whatever, but you remember Larry Schoenberg or Sherman?
Oh yeah, Schornborn.
Larry's. So I worked at Larry's Sporting Goods.
Oh, cool.
Beaverton.
That's amazing.
like early in college. Or one of the summers I worked in college, but it's just kind of funny to see that.
So you remember, the old Stewart's. Well, we had a couple of different days, but back I think it would have been. Stewart's.
I don't remember. This was on Halsey.
It was on Halsey. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Whenever it was on Halsey, was the one I was in.
Yeah.
If I was ever in Portland or visiting a friend and going east, either you go to the fly shop in Welch's or wait till you get over to. Over to Mop or
head over to Bachman's no, it's cool. It's been kind of fun on this because I started out, like we mentioned, Trey Combs. I wanted to do this podcast on my own, so I kind of kept it as a little secret. I just didn't really mention, because a lot of people out here, had heard of my dad. He's an older guy now, so a lot of new people don't know.
Sure.
But I kind of want to do a thing, so I built it.
30 years.
What's that?
the shop was around for 20, 30 years, right?
Oh yeah. No, it was around in I think I want to say when I was born, so right around the mid '70s.
Yeah.
It was started.
Okay.
I think. Well, he started out of his garage, back before I was even born. He was a teacher. He was a school teacher
Right.
for like half his life, and then he was like fly fishing was his dream, and he basically started in his garage and slowly at one point just said, let's do it, and he dove into it in the mid '70s and had pretty good run there. And I think actually it was 2008, and my brother kind of helped later on, but that kind of took that crash of the market helped to take
Right.
them out. But it was a really small shop. And
This would have been just before that when it was probably like 05, 06 or somewhere in there. But yeah, I don't remember is your shop, and I mean,
well, there's two. Yeah, there's
Streamboard and Tiger was the only other real fly shop I remember being super prominent at that.
exactly. Yeah, no,
super early on.
and there's some good ones now, but
Sure.
yeah. Well, Tom, I've got a whole list of questions that I didn't even look at here, so we've kind of just been.
I'm sorry, I rambled on too much.
No, this has been awesome. Hey, I do want to check out a couple things, a couple quick ones. I guess we call this the rapid
Sure.
fire round before we get out of here.
That's fine. Yeah.
So you had a recent story. I think it was John Prine in a recent.
Yes.
Was that? I can't remember. That was a couple like last year or.
No, it was this last issue actually. It was in the summer, post COVID issue. We did not do a spring issue because
that's right. Because of that.
Yeah. So that's just the summer.
So I was so that was in there. So John Price. So obviously, I guess people can read that if they want to hear that. But I'm curious on your, as far as music do you have a favorite kind of musician or type of music you like?
Yes, I really, really love that John Prine style, but I was, for the most part, a little more hippie-ish. I was a pretty big jam band by Widespread Panic, Fish, the Dead. I only saw maybe a half a dozen times, and I thought that they were great, and the show was a great experience in Eugene, my teenage years or whatever. But I went to a lot of that sort of Blues Traveler, Panic, Red Rocks, sort of Big Head Todd, Fish, sort of.
Oh yeah.
Throughout most of the 90s, that's it. My scene, and I really like live music, so I went a lot to them. But now it's a little bit more on the countryside. And funny, John Prine was ingrained in all of us who were rafting guides at Grand Teton National Park north of Jackson, because our river boss was a John Prine fan, and all we had was a tape deck in our big truck that would haul these. We ran these 30-foot rafts. They were bridge pontoons, and
wow.
And there was only one truck. They were 33 feet long.
These are the ones with the big paddle in the back, right?
Yeah, they're sweet boats. So that's how I learned to raft, is running those sweet boats. Really teaches you how to read water, right?
So it's a sweet boat.
Anyway,
so it's on a tangent here, but it's basically, isn't there a paddle in the front and the back of the boat, right? And it's this humongous, gigantic boat.
It looks just like a rudder. And there's one in the back and one in the front. There's only 2 or 3 places in the country. The Grand Canyon run them, but some guys on the Middle Fork, Salmon, will run their gear boats.
I remember that.
From a sweet boat, and you run the by yourself. And yeah, you were really a stud if you could run that boat the whole 10 miles up a river without whoever was in front giving you a hand with the front sweep.
Oh wow!
But it was super hard to do, but it was possible if you could run the whole thing. Like I said, it's not like a regular raft. You have to be a couple turns ahead of yourself.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
But anyway, tangent off, there was a big boat, a big truck that hauled it, and there was only one tape in there, and it was John Prine. So that was my introduction to. We just listened to it over and over and over. So early introduction to John Prine.
Gotcha. Cool. All right, well, let's keep this rapid fire going. I want to get a couple of these because we had some in our Facebook group. Mark Usick had a question for you, and he wanted to know what's the most common reason you have for turning away stories.
Not well written.
That's it. And like you said, that's.
But there's a very specific side of that. Not well edited. It's too many.
Oh,
using too many words. Like
mhm.
the one most common advice I tell people, just eliminate every unnecessary word. It's the most basic advice writers
Mhm.
get if they've read about it, but it's still not done often enough. Just when you think it's ready to go through and edit it one more time and take out another 10, 20, sometimes 300 words.
Yep.
But that is by far the biggest reason. I mean, it can be poorly written as well, but then I won't even get to the editing stage, right? But
Mhm.
if we're turning something away, it's if I look at it and it's just too much work to re-edit, and most of the time that is because it's just overly
Overly, it's too
written.
wordy.
Yeah,
It's too wordy.
5,000 words and should be 2,000 or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's right. Awesome. Awesome. So here's one. This might be maybe easy, maybe hard, but finish this sentence. Fly fishing needs.
More diversity.
There you go. Perfect. I love that. I
Period.
love
I go
that.
to a TU banquet or something that doesn't look like America to me.
No, no, that is amazing. Yeah,
We've
that's
all contributed to it, but that's actually an easy one.
that is an easy one. That's right. Okay, perfect. And we, sports. I think we mentioned this on email. We're both into that. We actually have some similarities. I think hoops was one of your big sports. What was your? I was curious. Were you a like point guard or what position?
Oh, as a whole, a basketball player too. So I'm 5'8", and so, but I played point guard. My what would have been a marginally successful high school sports career anyway was cut short because I broke my femur in a dirt biking incident
Hmm.
when I was in the summer after 8th grade. So I started high school on crutches and not that I probably would have been a NBA point guard anyway, but that kind of set me back some as a participant, but as a fan, I'm a huge Blazers fan, even bigger Oregon State fan, and I'm very excited that the Pac-12 is going to start playing ball on the November 7th.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I mean, they're late to the party versus other conferences in the country, but college football is my number one.
No kidding.
Sure.
College football. What's a good?
Absolutely.
How do you keep? Is there a good? Are there any magazines on college football out there that are good?
Yeah, usually that's it's the
ESPN.
one-off, Pac-12.
Oh, gotcha.
Or whatever. I mean, still SI has great reporting on it.
Yeah.
And that's probably still the best in terms of the actual reporting and writing.
Yeah.
You get profiles of a lot of players in some of the general interest men's magazines and stuff like that. But I'm a big fan of the college game.
Okay, cool. And on we talked about a few of the departments. Any other departments just quickly you want to touch on, the kind of the essence of the Drake, anything else that's is there one that's kind of you see as you hear a lot of feedback from readers?
Yeah, a lot of times as far as feedback goes, it's typically a news piece, but oftentimes it will be a profile that we run that somebody had an opinion about or pass, and it's a lot of feedback, both good and bad. But we don't do a lot of kiss and tell sort of things, but you got to balance that with having everything be exotic and like unattainable. But it's I'd say if I was to add up all the letters from the editor I've gotten over the years, I'd say the most would maybe be on references to British Columbia and the stories and trips I've done up there and into Alaska, and a lot of times steelheaders. But I think that just has a lot to do with the fact that fly fishers all over the country, when they read a story like that, it reminded them of it when they did it after college for a summer, or they went up there and had some trip in British Columbia or Alaska, and it still is just the most majestic place to go. So I think that tugs at the heartstrings of more readers than just about anything else. And occasionally we delve into politics, and we certainly hear about that as well.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
um, but if it's travel wise, it's usually steelhead or salmon stories and the
Yeah,
Alaska or BC.
that's right. Is it? Do you feel like you're more of a west kind of more stories west side, Western U.S., or is it kind of a good mix of the whole country, all North America?
I try to be the latter, and I've gotten better at it. I think the first couple of years, some of it was just meter, right? Like I didn't know if someone wrote a steelhead story, I knew I could tell right away whether they were probably legit or not. But a striper story or something, I didn't know who was, But I have now kind of established a lot of those people, or at least know who I can call to say, hey, what's the story with this person, whatever. But yeah, I try really hard to make it. Well, and I address it in the individual stories. If somebody's writing a story and they just mention, they'll give some local reference to a river in Eastern Washington. I'm like, dude, my subscriber from Georgia is not going to have any idea what the yak is, or whatever. No. I mean, just it's about trying. Some of that comes in having to take a picture, a bigger view, and it's okay to use, especially with steelheading and spay casting, which I know is a lot of your specialty. Mm-hmm. There's just so much to go, and it's okay to have some of that because people, even if they don't get it, mm-hmm. they want to be in the crowd. They want to figure it out. They want to, and so maybe they'll go then learn it. But it's when you're talking about areas in certain parts of the country, I just really want to be authentic. I definitely send more of those pieces back to people. I'll edit those much more lightly than I would in terms of terminology. I may not even know it, but it's probably something that they use on the Cape all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I approach that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that seems like that'd be challenging until you get to a point where, like it sounds like you the whole everybody in fly fishing, so you can fact check. You could pretty easily.
Well, people aren't shy about letting me know.
Oh yeah.
You called that you called that the UP. That's actually South Michigan 31 or whatever the road.
Where do they call that out? Where is this? I know
so-called. I'll get 5 letters from someone if you name a town and say it's in the UP and it's not.
Oh wow.
Michigan. The people from Michigan are not shy about letting you know. It's all in good fun, but they definitely let you know about it.
That's cool. So you actually get letters. Obviously letters. There's also, and we won't have enough time to dig way into this, but the forum, right? You have you've had a pretty active forum, right, where people kind of are in there. Can you just describe maybe in a short minute or so what that forum is all like, and if somebody was to jump into it right now, what would they see?
Answer your question is no. I cannot describe what that is like in 1 minute.
Yeah.
I mean, that is probably a whole nother podcast discussion.
No kidding.
It's evolved, but it's got its own life, its own.
And you just let it go, right? You don't really monitor it too much. You just kind of let people just go whatever goes.
Yeah, there's their own sheriffs in there, and they know what the rules are, and have always been pretty good about keeping them. There's not a lot. I mean, there's only a couple,
Yeah.
But
is there a little bit of politics in there?
Yeah, there's a whole thread for politics, and that's just the way we did it. A lot of people don't want to hear about it. Okay, so if you're going to have this discussion, go here where you guys can knock yourself out.
Yeah,
and that's and it's. I mean, some of the numbers on that board. Yeah. If I ever wanted to sell ads for that board, there would be a lot of takers.
Yeah.
just because of the traffic. I've never commercialized it. I've never done.
That's awesome.
It's just there's a lot of people have drifted off and gone to social media and whatnot. But there's still a core of people there that that's a whole nother discussion. It's a unique part of the website.
Has anybody done a piece? I mean, we've had almost 4 years of Trump now in there. Have you had any pieces any connection to Trump in any of your issues?
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot. I mean, we Monty Burke wrote a semi-profile of Trump Jr.
Oh right.
I've met and is a angler, and
Uh-huh.
and we've communicated a few times. And he certainly fishes with 3 or 4 guides that I know around the country, and it
Uh-huh.
was not a flattering profile at
No.
all.
No.
But he gets it in some ways, I mean, I think it's, he and his dad, it really comes down to this divisiveness thing. And that's, in my opinion, that's really one of the biggest drawbacks. But I really don't know if you just sat down and talked to one of them as an individual,
Yeah.
if there would really be like that. Right. I mean, you could probably compare it to the last topic of the message boards. There's guys on there that come off trying to sound like badasses, and it's just their online message board personality. I think a lot of times politicians have to take on this personality because it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a lot more fascinated by Trump Jr. in a lot of ways, just because I think he's the one that's kind of embraced the political side of it, of that family, more so than the daughter, son-in-law, and things like that.
Yeah.
And so that's looking forward. I'm not sure what that's going to mean.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see if out of all of this comes out of, you think about the Kennedy dynasty, man, it'd be funny to see if, there's actually more Trumps come out of, into politics as we move forward.
There's good. A lot. Well, I was about to say, well, we'll know more in a month. Maybe we won't. Maybe it'll take longer than that. But
that's true.
I mean, anyone who reads the Drake knows the conservation issues that we take on and things like that, and that do not sit well with the right wing of the Republican Party.
No.
And that's the nature of the sport and the importance of the environment to me personally and to people who fly fish.
Exactly. So. Yeah, I think somebody said it recently on here that it's just it's not really I guess it's political, but it's really not when you're talking about saving the salmon or what other species are out there. That's just the bottom line of protecting.
But right now, Dave, people will make anything political.
That's true.
I'm honestly just,
that's true.
I'm sick of both sides.
Yeah.
Period.
No, I know.
Just the constant debate with the families and friends that you cannot. I'm just so tired of all of that. And sadly, it takes something like these fires to really see some of these small communities come together.
Right.
And no one gets at that moment.
Yeah.
Like, the voting for or whatever, and hang on to some of that sort of common ground, if you will. But
it's there's a we could well Tom, I'm going to let you get out of here. Before I do, I just want to check in the next 6 months or so, anything new coming for you or the Drake we can expect.
A more robust website is
nice.
Not website. The website itself.
I was gonna say it looks good. The website looks good.
I haven't put a lot of content on there. A lot of that's kind of by design. There's someone I'm gonna be working with that's handling some of that, and we're making a plan for it. And so that's exciting. Just part of the being a modern media outlet, and
that's right.
And keeping with the Drake voice and reporting and things like that, things that just make more sense to come out right now rather than 2 months down the road with issues coming out. So
that's huge.
That's kind of where that's going.
That's huge.
And I'm excited about that.
That's great. Okay, well, we'll keep an eye on that. And if they want to find you, just the drakemag.com.
Yep. info@tom@drakemag.com.
Perfect. All right, Tom, well, I'll let you get out here.
Chat, Dave.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I love that, again, at the start, we're like, well, where are we going to go with this one? And we didn't even barely talk fishing. And again, for some reason, for me, those sometimes are the best ones. I think some people want more the tips and tricks. We could have talked steelhead all day, right?
But, you and I both live on the Oregon coast.
Yeah.
We could talk. That could get dangerously deep inside. Maybe that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, I'm with you. I listen to fishing podcasts, and I kind of like when they veer off of some of the other aspects I haven't touched on. Plus, I know your history with the podcast guests, and I don't hold a candle to those guys in terms of, my expertise or knowledge of
Right.
space and that sort of thing I love listening to the guests you have, though. They're fantastic.
I hear you. No, and I always think of, I can't remember who I heard this from, but I always think like, okay, did I get something new, right? Is there anything today? We was kind of a general chat, but is there anything today we talked about that nobody knew, that people hadn't heard before? Or is this all, is it kind
No,
of...
I think there's a few things. I definitely never mentioned Larry's Sporting Goods.
Oh, there you go. We got Larry's out of you.
That's for sure. And also, I think that I don't think I've ever told this, how much of my thoughts when I was a lifty.
Oh,
really
yeah.
was where the Drake really came out of. It wasn't me being a fishing. It was sitting there during the winter in a lift shack.
And I wanted to dig into that. We won't. But when you said that, I was like, I just pictured, like a person holding a stop sign on the street, right? Like those people are out there for 8 hours a day, and you're just like, man, they have a lot of time to think, kind of, right?
Well, I bet there's a lot of people who fly fish who were lift ops at some point in their history in mountain towns, like almost all patrolmen or ski. A lot of people that's where you start out.
Oh, right.
On the mountain. Anybody that's been on a remote part of a big mountain on a slow day.
Yeah.
No, on the top shack, not the bottom, where you have to pay attention, but the top shack. A lot of downtime.
Dang.
A lot of thinking.
That's some serious meditation stuff. So, all right, Tom, I'll let you get out of here. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, thanks.
All right.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes, all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/162. It would be amazing if you could support the podcast for as little as $5. You can join the local community where we support our members and local companies. Head over to wetflyswing.com/members to get started today. Thanks in advance if you have time to support or are already a supporter. I want to thank you again for taking the time today to listen to the episode. I'm really looking forward to catching up with you maybe online or on the river.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.